Welcome to Ministry Pivot. I'm Reverend Russ. I'm super excited that you joined us again today or tonight or this afternoon, whenever you are watching this pivot. I'm super excited to have you, like I said, here with us on this pivot. Don't forget that if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to Ministry Pivot on all of the social media platforms. Also, make sure that you follow us. Make sure if you're listening on podcast, you're listening audio, please rate and leave comments. That's how podcasts get rated, and that's how they move up in the rankings. And so really would appreciate that. I have people watching from all over, not just the US, even the world. And so thankful to you all watching the data month by month and seeing those numbers. And so super excited that you have joined. If you know someone who can be inspired and helped through Ministry Pivot, please make sure you send it to them. We had an awesome pivot last time around. Remember, every second and fourth Thursday of the month, we release them. Last time we had Samantha Silawani, and she spoke about her pivot as we deal with ministry calling. And so super excited about that. You can go back and listen to that show note and listen to that pivot, and also watch and read those show notes. And then coming up today, we have Terrell Daniel. He is an awesome leader, awesome ministry leader. He is a Chick-Fil-A owner, operator. And we're going to talk about how Chick-Fil-A made pivots and how he made pivots even during the pandemic to be able not just to grow, but to add staff on. Super excited about that. And then in 2 weeks from now, we'll have Aaron Spears, who is an awesome father, awesome friend, awesome husband. He is also a professional drummer. And so you'll hear from him. And don't forget, this is still Ministry Pivot. And so while I'm doing ministry calling, I have some great ministry opportunities coming to church ministry wise. I have an interview coming up with Alan George. He used to be the former, now used to be the campus pastor, online pastor rather, for Life.Church. And so he and I talk about online ministry. That's coming. Again, don't forget to subscribe so you can hear all of these pivots that are coming up, and even the others that I have. I can't wait to tell you about my next live pivot that's coming in a couple months. Super excited about that one. And then I've also been blessed to be able to write articles. And so you can go to Ministry Pivot /articles or Ministry Pivot .com and just go there, and you'll be able to read articles. I did one recently with Outreach entitled Dealing with How Do You Deal or How Do You Engage People in Biblical Engagement During This Pandemic. And so please make sure that you read those articles as well. But without talking more, I'm excited again to have you with us on today, tonight, whenever you're watching. I'm super excited to get into this conversation with Terrell. Welcome to Ministry Pivot. This is Reverend Russ. Again, I am super excited to have you join us for today's pivot, tonight's pivot, this afternoon's pivot. Whenever you're watching or listening to this, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to rate it. Don't forget to look for the show notes. I am in this series, and you've heard us say it, that we are looking at Ministry Pivot, not just from the church side, but also from the side of our calling, our gift. And God is uniquely united me with some great brothers and sisters in the faith. And today or tonight or this afternoon, whenever you're watching, we have another one. His name is Terrell Daniel, and I'm going to have Terrell come. He is a father. He is a husband. He is a industry leader. He is an entrepreneur. He is also a Chick-fil-A owner. And that's right. He has the secret sauce. But Terrell is going to come, man. And Terrell, just thank you for being with us. Appreciate you being on Ministry Pivot for everybody here. I gave you a short intro on kind of some of the stuff, but there's way more to you than that. If you wouldn't mind, first, again, thank you for being on Ministry Pivot. But secondarily, if you can just share a little bit of your background, your history with those who are watching or listening.
Sure. First, I'd say my pleasure. Thank you for the invite. And I love the first two titles that you said, husband and father. Those are the most important titles that I have.
Amen.
I've been married to my wife, Kara, for 18 years. We have 3 kids. Ella is our oldest. She's 14. Hannah Grace the middle. She's 12. And then Cullen is our youngest. I got my boy. He is 7. He'll be 8 in March. So those guys are the reason that I do what I do. I get up and kind of grind it out every day. So that's the personal side. Professionally, I grew up, I'm an Army brat. So my dad was in the military, got used to the discipline, enjoyed the discipline. So went to a military college in New York. After that, ended up going into the Army for 5 years. During that time, I spent time in Iraq and made the decision, just like, not sure this is what I want to do for a career, because it was really hard on the family, obviously. I deployed almost a year after being married.
Wow.
So after getting out of the military, went and taught middle school mathematics for 3 years, and actually
Wow.
fell in love with teaching the kids. I loved working with young adults and just seeing them grow and seeing them do things that they hadn't done before. Um, but there's some things with that I was kind of like, I don't know if I can do this for 30 years and be happy. The bureaucracy of education between the parents and the administration, just like I need to find something else to do. So I went and worked for the government, which I worked for the commissary, which is a military grocery store at that time. It was like $6 billion in sales. I got into strategic planning and then process improvement. So process improvement, essentially, it's a strategy called Lean Six Sigma, a methodology called Lean Six Sigma. So I got certified. There's white, green, black belt. I got certified as a green belt, trained as a black belt. It's pretty phenomenal skill set. You take math and you apply it to the business environment, and you can save hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, depending on the scope of the projects for the
Wow.
organizations that you work with. But I was working with the two G's. I call it government and groceries, two industries that are typically pretty slow. And I was like pulling
Uh-huh.
my hair out, like talking about things that they were like, "What are you talking about?" And so I ended up leaving there and going to Capital One. And the cool thing between both of those organizations is they actually paid for me to get my MBA,
Wow.
and which was pretty cool. But went to Capital One, was a process engineer at Capital One. Did that for 6 years within the credit card business, and basically went from team to team, helping them be more efficient and effective in their processes. And so while that's important, and we talk about calling and sort of sweet spot, Capital One especially was a place that I got there and I was like, this, like, I'm learning a lot. I learned a ton, but I could tell it just wasn't my forever job. It just wasn't in my
Yeah.
sweet spot. But all of those jobs that I mentioned, the military, the discipline of the military, teaching, working with young adults, and then the process engineering sort of business consultant from Capital One, all translates really nicely to the restaurant. So I feel like I'm in all of those spaces when I'm in the business. I really get to use all of the prior experience that I had. And probably the most important experience that I use is that teacher. As recently as this morning, I look at the restaurant as an extension of my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Where I honestly think there were times when I was teaching stuff in math that the kids were like, "When am I ever going to learn this?" Right? Like a box
Yeah.
of Worcester plot. When am I ever going to use this? I should say. Um, and now I can teach things that I'm like, "You're going to use this when you go home. You're going to use this, all the time." So as
Yeah.
recently as this morning, I was talking to my leaders about conflict resolution and walking them through what are the strategies for conflict resolution. Here's a framework that you can use to resolve conflict. And I'm sitting looking at them like, you don't know how. This is like gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This will
Yeah.
help you in your relationships. This will help you in the workplace. So that is what that gets me kind of excited.
No, that's great. That's great. Now I heard you say three different jobs before you landed at Chick-fil-A. I got a couple Chick-fil-A questions that I'm going to ask you. Obviously,
Yeah,
what is it like working at Chick-fil-A? But I don't want to jump over that because again, the whole purpose of this series of sessions is to talk with, kind of encourage, hopefully, those who are watching who have a gift, have a calling, but it hasn't quite clicked just yet. And it sounds like you had three. Road stops toward what, and I'm assuming now, you said that the term a couple times, your forever job. I appreciate that. Probably going to use that sometime. But
mm-hmm.
you had three road stops on to what may now be your forever job. Can you talk about kind of what you did, kind of what you heard God saying as you knew your gift and you knew that this was what you needed to do, but it wasn't quite fit, right? Because there may be some people who are watching or listening who you're at the job, you're at the space, and you feel like you enjoy part of it or you feel like it works in some way, but it's not the quite fit. Like I used to work for the government, and I knew then I quit.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it wasn't the fit. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
the place where I wanted to retire, the place where I wanted to say, okay, this is it. But can you talk to that about that?
Yeah, it's one of those, Rev Russ, where I think about, I always knew that I wanted to own my own business. And honestly, I wanted to do a restaurant, but my wife
Hmm.
and I were like, I can barely cook. How am I going to open, how am I going to open up a restaurant? So I wasn't going to do a mom and pop something because we're fairly risk averse people. So I kind of put that on the back burner and said, well, I want to get these skills. And
Hmm.
on top of wanting to get these skills, I always had this desire to be a part of something that was greater than I am, as well as to give back. And so teaching was I was absolutely fulfilled in terms of working with the students. There were just
Okay.
things about teaching that I'm like, there's just something that was missing. But along the
Hmm.
way, it's like, okay, I've learned that I can really I can motivate young people to get them to perform in ways that they hadn't before. So that was, and I think as long as you keep that ultimate goal in mind, which mine was, you know, own a business, continue to have an impact on people. I feel like that was my North Star. And you, as you go along, you learn new things. I feel like
Yeah.
that's the key sort of influence of the entire process.
Okay. No, that's great. That's great. Let me so now you're at Chick-fil-A, and so shameless plug, obviously you're at the Chick-fil-A on Tech Road, right
Yes.
over by Kingdom, Kingdom
Mm-hmm.
Fellowship. Shout out my pastor,
Yes.
Reverend Watley. And so I've long time youth ministry. When I first got into the area with Kingdom, well, what was Reed Temple North, Kingdom, I met all of the owners. I met your previous owner. And that's how I met you when you took over the store.
Mm-hmm.
We met Terrell. So talk with me about Chick-fil-A before the pandemic. What was it like before? And then obviously I'm gonna ask you questions about the pivot that you
Yeah, yeah,
had to make after.
for sure. Yeah. So I think before a normal year, sort of current state for us was one, most important is constantly focusing on cultivating a purpose driven organization and culture. And so those that purpose driven it ties to, and I've got it right here. I have it right here because this is actually my wife helps me, uh, helps with the business, and she does a lot of the front end interviewing. And she's got it
Okay.
here because the first thing that we talk to our interviewees about is this card. And if you see it, the front of it is it's got our store vision, which is basically make people's lives better,
That's
right?
good.
So
Yeah,
everyone's
that's good.
focused in that business on making people's lives better. It's got our mission, it's got our values, and it's got 10 team member behaviors. Things like I am punctual and in uniform. What else? I treat everyone with dignity, honor, and respect. I give my
Yeah.
best effort with a positive attitude. So all things on this card, do they apply at Tech Road and Chick-fil-A? Sure. But really, it was created with the intent of to translate after they leave Tech Road to give people life
Yeah.
skills and a foundation that will help them forever and ever. And so before normal year, we were cultivating a purpose driven environment organization slash culture.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing I'd say is that we were working the plan. So we have a 5 year plan, and every November we come together and um, we think through our talent strategy, we think through operational excellence, we think through customer experience, and we think through marketing. And so that plan is we break it down into years, into quarters, and we're
Hmm.
constantly working the plan for in the business, for the normal cadence of the business.
Okay. Okay. That's great. So now talk to me about the in March 2020. I know for us in the church world, it was the second or third week,
Something
March
happened in
2020.
March.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what happened in March.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to me about what that was like when you found out the what we found out that this stay at home for a day or two was now going to be no, this is probably going to be it, and this is going to be for a while. And now we're in at this recording 9+ months, right? So
Yeah.
Talk to me about how you had to pivot with your team, how Chick-fil-A had to pivot, even what global Chick-fil-A was telling you all as, hey, this is kind of the way forward. Like, was that even a thing? Like, did they even say, hey, this is what you do? Or is it kind of like, this is what we're going to give you. You kind of figure everything else out.
Well, that first month was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Overnight, we saw a 40% reduction in sales. So I think
Wow.
important in terms of how we were able to respond to all of it. One, my background, like I was in a war zone. So I think that's important context. You know what I
That's
mean? It's
good.
kind of like
Yeah.
I led 90 guys through the desert. And so in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, this felt similar to that, believe it or not. But I also knew
Wow.
that like no one was really shooting at us. So it was like, it's gonna
Okay.
be okay. And my mindset was also, we are not going to back down from anything. Like
Okay.
we're not, it's not going to be one of these where we're just going to sit in the corner and try to just like hunker down and try to
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah.
We're going to take some risk. And I think part of what allowed us to take some risk, kind of the similar thing with Chick-fil-A at the corporate level, is they had cash. They had cash. And so when you have
Hmm.
cash and bad things happen, it gives you a little bit of flexibility to be able to invest in different ways. And so we weren't in a position where we were struggling. I actually looked at my wife and said, we may have to lose some money for a little bit, but I think that we may be okay. And
Okay.
so a week in, I started having some really hard conversations with team members that I had, specifically leaders, where there was just some opportunities, and ended up getting, during the thick of it, most of those leaders actually resigned themselves. So
Okay.
when that happened, and given the all of everything I just said, it really made me. I had been praying, God, help me find the right leaders for my business to help us get to where we want to be. God, help us
Yeah.
find the right leaders. And that was a prayer that I prayed every morning and every night. God, help us find the right leaders. And so as soon
Yeah.
as those
Yeah.
folks started leaving, that decision to thrive, not survive, I looked around. I'm like, okay, I think at a minimum, this is going to last 3 or 4 months. At a minimum, is what I thought. Like,
Yeah.
I need to, while I can kind of get small for a little bit, I need to bring people in this business so when we turn back on, we're ready to go. And so I put out a couple of job postings,
Wait,
and
wait,
little
wait, wait,
bit,
hold on,
yeah,
wait, hold on. So in the middle of this, when people not sure about job stuff, when people not sure about what the economy is going to look like, you started hiring staff. Am I
I
hearing that
did.
correctly?
I
Okay.
did.
All right.
Yes.
Continue. I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
didn't miss that.
Yeah. Yeah. I did. I did. And everyone, I remember sitting around the table talking to the other operators. There's like 12 in the area. And I said, are you guys gonna do any hiring? And they were like, it's too dangerous. And I was just like, I think I'm gonna give it a shot. And
Yeah.
I mean, talk about it. That in itself was scary, but we just started. I had never seen as many applicants applying. And what that started was not only a ton of applicants applying, but qualified applicants applying. And
Wow.
so
Yeah.
from that point forward, when these applicants were coming in, I mean, it confirmed that, and I say this, not, I want to be empathetic to the people who are struggling during the season, but it was truly God used this challenge to provide an answer to my prayers around people. And
Wow.
so we've been
Yeah.
able to bring in our business 90 people since COVID happened. 90,
Wow.
um, which is crazy. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and I still, honestly, I kind of like pinch myself and I say to my wife, like, did that really just happen like that?
Yeah.
Is this really
Yeah.
happening? And
Yeah.
so, and the only thing I can say is like, you have faith in God and you stay faithful and you try to continue to serve Him, good things typically happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I also want to level set for some people. If you're in a part of the country where Chick-fil-A is not a thing, I'm sorry. for you. I'm praying for you. But if you're in a part of the country where Chick-fil-A is a thing, which is a large part of the country, you understand their process, you understand their value in people. And Terrell has done that from day one, from when I met him. And it was super awesome to hear you, because Terrell, one of the things, and what I meant by level set, one of the things is your store currently, you're one of the stores that doesn't have a drive-through. And so in the midst of COVID, right, in the midst of no indoor dining, limited indoor seating, people can't drive through. They have to, you had to, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, and that's really where I want to kind of lean in with some of the pivoting pieces, because I know we've had conversations, but I want people to hear how you, obviously you prayed and then you creatively leaned into other options.
Right. Yeah, and so the point that you made, I think my mindset would have been completely different if I had a drive through. And the people who had drive throughs were like, let's just go ahead and close down the inside our business. And at that point, 60 to 70% of my business was coming inside. And I knew
Wow.
that I knew that if I closed down the inside of the business, that it would be the death of my business, I thought. And I didn't know when it would
Wow.
come back. And so
Hmm.
really, I'll ask my team often, a question that I say to people is, because a lot of folks sometimes will say that can't be done. And I will say to folks like, what needs to be true for this to happen? And so that question was asked, and again, I ask it a lot. My team members can almost take it out of my mouth. But what needs to be true for us to serve guests safely in this business? And so they started answering questions like, we need to have some sort of plexiglass. We need to do social distancing. We need to have mat. All these things started coming to the surface. And I think probably the most challenging thing was not necessarily like, hey, I'm scared, or, what am I going to do? It was more, how do I help my team members navigate this sort of uncertainty? Because they were scared.
Hmm.
They're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to get COVID. I want to take it home to my family, all those things. And the
Yeah.
first thing we did obviously was say, hey, we respect whatever it is that you choose to do. And there were
Yeah.
some of our team members that opted out, but it left me with a bunch of people that I'm looking at saying, I got to help you figure out how to keep your lights on and put food on the table. And so
Yeah.
then there's the question of what needs to be true for us to operate safely. And so again, with all the uncertainty from the beginning, we quickly did some things. I want to say honestly, within 2 weeks of it. And then of course Chick-fil-A kind of came in and provided air cover. They gave us operational requirements and all these
Okay.
things that I really feel like have been really effective. Things like, we're taking temperatures of team members when we're coming in. We're, sanitizing every 30 minutes, all the
Yeah.
things to make sure that we stay safe.
No, I think that's great. I think the point in the pivot was you leaned on the team, right? You asked the team. You had these new team members come in, but you leaned on the team. You asked the team, and then you did business in a different way that would move you forward, right? And I think
Right.
that's a super key point, because it wasn't like you had to create new technology, right? It wasn't like you had to create something. Now you use stuff that you had. You may have leaned into some stuff more, but you
Yeah.
already had an app, because I used it, because again, you're down
Hmm.
the street. So I used your app before.
Hmm.
So you had those things. And it's one of the things I've been saying in this series of Pivot, the scripture that stays with me, and really has been for the past couple of months, is Exodus chapter 4, right? Where God is speaking to Moses, and Moses is trying to get out of his largest leadership position ever, right?
Hmm.
He's trying to get out of it. And God is explaining to him that you're not going to get out of it. And then Moses finally says, I, he don't say I, that's Reverend Russ said I. He says, okay, what am I going to tell these people? How are they going to believe me? And God says the one line that for me changes the impact of everything. He says, what's in your hand? He says, what have you been carrying that you have devalued, that you have gotten used to, that you have made old? If you watch the pivots, I'm running through this same run that I do, because it is so important. And I think that's what I hear you saying, that God was like, okay, cool. You got the same store,
Mm-hmm.
same people to an extent, some new people, but the same process. But now look at it differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at it again
Mm-hmm.
and see it differently. What kind of words of encouragement would you give to someone who's listening, who's watching, that may be in the same space in this in this month, whenever they're watching it, whenever they're listening to it? COVID may be over when you're listening to this, and I praise God if it is. But what kind of word of encouragement or word of advice would you give to them if you have someone who's in the midst of that pivot and they're trying to figure it out, and it's like you got to use what you have, but there's a new vision to kind of go forward. I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think the first thing is have a vision of where you're trying to go. Have a
Okay,
vision, and then at the same time have supporting values and a plan to achieve that vision. And then
that's
once
great.
you have it, because when you talk about what do you have in your hand, like all of these things for us and our business, we worked really hard last year on driving our mobile business. We had signed up for delivery. So the plan was there. We didn't have to really look differently. We just had to accelerate the plan. And so,
That's great.
and along the way, we've adapted, but have a vision, have values and plan that support that vision, and then be willing to change along the way and stay encouraged, because
Yeah,
there were times I'm not gonna lie, like if through there's always challenge and struggle, and if you don't have the challenge and struggle, you're not really growing. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
there's a whole nother story around people that occurred in my business it took a year for it to develop, and it's finally paying off now, but it required a lot of adjusting, getting feedback and adjusting.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
Does
think
that
that's great. I think yeah, no, that is that answers it. I
perfect?
think because in it, and one of the things that I wrote down and I have for some of these is just that this is it's a season of opportunity. More than it is a season of struggle, right? More than it is a season of I don't know why I'm here and this is going to be the death of me, right? I appreciated what you said a couple moments ago when you were like, yeah, I I I was in combat. Like nobody's shooting at us. Like I appreciate that. Like I'm gonna
Mhm.
use that again in other context. Obviously, I've never been in battle before, but I'm like, yo, I know a guy who literally looked at it like, yeah, you know, the thing where people will say, if you know, I know you're very active. Some of us are active and we fall and people are like, what is there blood? If there's no blood, get up, let's go. But it's that kind of a
Yes,
understanding because I
yes,
think that God puts that in us. I think that God puts, and I think
right.
that that's very important, man. So I think that that's great. Last question I'll ask you around leadership, around pivot. Are there any? I do show notes, and so I'll write down some of the points we talk about, some of the things that kind of stick out. I'll write down in the show notes, and so if you're listening or watching, you can go down to the show notes to read through some of the keys from this podcast. But I also would like to list, are there any books or resources that you would recommend for somebody? Anything that you read throughout this time that's been super helpful for you as you have made your ministry pivot with your gift, with your business, with your calling?
Yeah, there's so many. I think a recent one is Heart of Leadership by Mark Miller. Um,
That's good.
it's I talked to my Mark Miller is a Chick-fil-A executive, so I'm giving another Chick-fil-A plug. But Heart of Leadership, um, and in my business, I will often say to my team members, and this goes back to the one of the challenges with COVID at the beginning, is I will say my three priorities are um, team member experience. So my number
Hmm.
one business priority is team member experience. I want our team members to come in there and feel loved on, feel valued, unbelievable, positive, healthy culture. And then number two is guest experience, of course. But we know that if we take care of our team members, they're going to take care of our guests.
Yeah.
And then lastly is stewardship. So
Hmm.
stewarding this unbelievable brand that we have, and just making sure that we are ambassadors to the brand. So Mark
Hmm.
Miller's Heart of Leadership gets to that. You're
Okay.
being a servant leader.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
a couple of, I'll be honest, like I talk about one of the big things that whole, the financial piece. I don't want to get too much into that. Um, but being in a position where we could afford to invest a bit was important. And so
Yeah.
books like Millionaire Next Door, Rich Dad Poor Dad, are
Yeah.
some great resources. And then of course Dave Ramsey, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
times if we're not in a financial position, which I know
Yep.
I love, I know that you guys did the Dave. I think you did the financial piece.
We did.
I think
We actually yeah, we've had over 400 and some odd families through it. We actually, I think we're one of the larger churches that have done it, like in this extensive amount of time. We got a site license, and I think it's, I don't know, man, it's millions of dollars of debt that our people have seen. And my wife and I took it, and we
yep,
several $1,000s of debt
yep,
that we were able to cancel by going through it.
right. So those are the top three that come to mind. I'm always reading books around just or listening to books around and books around leadership and management. And then also just some podcasts that I listen to. Andy Stanley. I love Andy Stanley.
Yeah.
Some of the things that he
Yeah.
does. So
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. That's good.
yeah.
I think the important part is to understand that I don't think you can ever get out of learning,
Hmm.
especially in this season where we don't know what God has next, but we know He
Right.
has it planned. And if we're
Mm.
equipped for what He has planned, we can handle what He has next.
You just got to
So
listen.
yeah, yeah, I think so, man. So Terrell, man, any last words, any final comments before I wrap up?
Yeah, I think the one other thing that I just wanted the journey that I talked about around people. I, you know, a year or so ago, I was interacting with my leaders, and I just felt disconnected. There was just something
Hmm.
that was missing, and I couldn't quite get my arms around it. And I was like, I need some help. I need
Yeah,
someone to help me come in and figure out what's happening because I'm clearly not getting through to people. And I wanted to genuinely get through to folks. And so I brought in, again, an investment around people. I brought in a leadership
hmm,
development coach who was intended to develop my leaders, but also help me develop and meet them where they were. And he came in and he introduced a an assessment. It's predictive index, basically like a personality assessment and a
yeah,
cognitive assessment. And as he looked at the team, he was like, "Hey, you have everyone on your team is basically the same profile, and you're the only one who's like you." And I was like, "Oh." So I had a lot of social people, but no analytical. So we'd go in a room and talk, and it would feel good, but they'd walk out, and we just couldn't get stuff done. And so
wow,
at that point, it was like, okay, you got a couple of options. You can find some people within the organization, develop them, or you could go out and find them outside of the organization, which is a challenge in itself, especially back then,
hmm,
um, because the unemployment rate was at like 3%. So there was
yeah,
people weren't knocking down the doors.
yeah,
In
yeah,
come COVID, and so COVID came
wow,
in, and we for all those 90 people that I talked about, we literally give them an assessment now. And probably the biggest blessing of COVID, I went and took training, 3 days worth of training in this predictive index software. And
yeah,
I am able to work with our team in a way that recognizes one, their strengths and their blind spots, which they're called blind spots for a reason. Most people don't know theirs. And so you're
yeah,
able to work with them and teach them, but have them live in their strength so that they can come in and be productive. And honestly, when they're doing things that they're good at, they're more passionate about it. And so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
completely changed the game in our business in a way that I am not leading everyone the same way. I lead individuals differently in our business, which for me as the leader can be exhausting at times because I'm like looking at their profiles, trying to,
hmm,
all the things that all the information that I have, and then going to them and talking to them and interacting with them in a completely different way that I might interact with someone else. But it really has been, you talked about secret sauce earlier. It has
yeah,
been the
yeah,
secret sauce for our business. And so that would be for folks listening, are the people that you're working closely with. Do you truly understand them and their gifts? And how do you meet them where they are?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's great. Again, I'll list that in the show notes. I also list. I know at Kingdom we use Strength Finders, which is the
Oh,
similar
yep.
thing. It
Yep.
literally
We,
is
you know,
focusing in on those. So, man, brother Terrell, I appreciate you
yes,
being
sir.
on, man. Thank you
Thank you.
for joining. No problem, man. Thank you for joining Ministry Pivot. Thank you all for listening, for watching. If you want more information about Ministry Pivot, you can just go to ministrypivot.com. You can also go on Instagram or Facebook to be able to follow us. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share this with somebody. Don't forget to look at the show notes. But most importantly, don't forget during this season, this is a season of opportunity. And we believe that God is doing something great. We just have to pivot toward it. Thank you again for joining us, and look forward to you joining the next ministry pivot. God bless.